The first question is government commitments from Assembly Member Garrett.
Thank you. Good morning. The election of the new government less than 2 weeks ago is incredibly exciting for London and the rest of the UK. We now have a huge opportunity to work hand in hand with the government to build a fairer, safer and greener London and use the power and potential of our cities across the UK to deliver national renewal and the change Britain needs. Last Tuesday, our Prime Minister invited UK mayors to Downing Street to discuss plans for our cities and regions, including local growth plans. The meeting was also attended by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, and the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government, Angela Rayner. Not once did the UK mayors and I meet with the previous Prime Minister or his predecessor. Within its first 4 days, we had more genuine engagement and serious discussion with this government than we had during the whole of the last administration. To quote Ben Houchen, Mayor of the Tees Valley, the Prime Minister was, and I quote, fresh, energetic and keen to get on with things. And what a change that makes. Our new Prime Minister will be putting country before party in a way that the last government never did. The new government is moving fast, announcing a vast legislative agenda for change yesterday in the King's speech, which included an English devolution bill, looking at more devolution, and announcing the establishment of a Council of the Nations and Regions. So much has happened that you'd be forgiven for forgetting that the government's been serving for just 13 days. But as the new cabinet open the books and speak with civil servants, it's clear they're only starting to get the full picture of the dire inheritance they've received following 14 years of neglect and failure. It's very clear from the conversations I'm having with the Prime Minister and Secretaries of State that this government will do things differently and will work closely with London because they know this is the key to turbocharging growth across the country. But given we're barely 2 weeks in, it would be wrong to give a running commentary on our engagement and negotiations with government. There's no doubt that the previous government held London back. London can now go from rowing against the tide of government obstructiveness and party politics to having the winds of this new government at our backs. I, for one, welcome that change, and Londoners clearly welcome it too.
So 2 minutes, 20 seconds, and not a single mention of any of the 4 very specific things that I had in my question. That might be some kind of record. So we have had the manifesto, we've had the election campaign, we've had lots of speeches, we've had post-election announcements, and we've had a King's speech, and control of private rents in London and control of suburban rail in London, which you have been asking for years, which you must have lobbied your colleagues in Westminster about for years. There's no commitment on either of those, giving you either of those powers, is there?
It's been 13 days. I mean, the idea that within 13 days...
No, it's been years that you've been asking for them, and there was nothing in the manifesto, nothing in the election campaign, and there have been announcements on rent, announcements on railways, and it seems to me to carefully rule out the things you've been asking for.
It's been 13 days. We're talking about undoing the damage of the last 14 years. I think the Prime Minister's been quite clear in relation to the inheritance this government has got from the last government.
It's got nothing to do with granting you powers. It's not a financial question, it's a power question. Should you have the powers over suburban rail or and private rents in London? The previous government thought that you couldn't be trusted with those powers. It seems to me the new government thinks the same. You have not had a commitment from your Labour colleagues that they will give you those powers, have you?
Well, it's clear that the members learnt nothing of the lessons of July the 4th and May the 2nd, when London and the country rejected their prospectus in terms of the Mayor of London.
Yeah, but you're not. I think what the members noticed is that
Assembly
you're not
Member,
answering my
please
question.
allow the Mayor to reply.
I would love him to reply, Chair. Love him to.
You wouldn't believe they've suffered the worst defeat since records began in terms of London elections and the general election, the arrogance and pomposity of the member. Look, it's been 13 days. I think the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, Ministers and the Civil Service have made a fantastic start in the first 13 days as a sprint. I'm looking forward to working with them on a whole host of issues.
Okay, so they've snubbed you on rent control and on control of suburban railways. After the last election, you wrote to the then new government saying that you needed £49 billion, needed was the word you used, £49 billion on housing over 10 years. That was what you told the last government you needed. Have you made the same demand of this government?
The letters I've written to members of the Cabinet have been letters to ask for meetings with them to discuss a variety of issues, but I was really pleased even though they asked
I'm
for
sorry,
it.
but I don't need to answer at cross purposes. The letter that I'm talking about, I have right here, it makes a very specific demand. It says, the Mayor, that's you, sets out the evidence for what is required to address London's housing crisis. Quote, the government needs to provide £4.9 billion per year over 10 years. That's the demand you made of the previous government, first few months after the election. Are you making the same demand of this new government?
Well, I think, Chair, in the member's own question, he referred to the first few months of the last election, at the first 13 days of the last election. I know he wrote the question before he received my answer a few moments ago, but I'm quite clear. In relation to the first letters I've written to members of the government are asking for meetings with them. By the way, I never had the courtesy of meetings with members of the previous government who were in the cabinet, but I'm really pleased. 13 days in, I've had a number of meetings, and they'll lead to conversations about the sorts of things our great city needs.
Okay, I think it's apparent that the government is snubbing your powers, your request for powers, and you have massively dialed back your previously ridiculously excessive requests of the government, because that was clearly political grandstanding, not a serious request. I will keep watching to see whether these new requests appear. I have a feeling they might not. Thank you, Chair.